Let's do the wide receivers here next. One of my bold predictions here is going to be kind of between a debate that goes on every single year between these
Every
two
year.
guys. Every single year. And every single year, people, they lean one way where I tend to lean the other way because I know the breakout's coming. And I'm talking about Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, right? Most people, if you take a survey, if you ask them who you're going to take over, who you're going to take first, it's going to be Adam Thielen. Most people are going to say it. And they're going to point to his first 8 weeks of last season, right? But what they fail to realize is that he benefited a lot from the lack of a run game, lack of Dalvin Cook. He benefited a lot from John DeFilippo, who was trying to earn a head coach job and who wanted to keep the ball in the air constantly, which is the reason why he got fired in the first place.
A big history with slot receivers, too. John
Big
DeFilippo,
history.
yeah, huge
D.D.
history.
Westbrook, by the way, keep an eye out for him
Hey,
as well.
all about it. Yeah, I'm with you.
All about that. But my bold prediction here, Nick, is going to be Stephon Diggs finishes a lot higher than Adam Thielen at the end of the year. And let me go with
How big of a gap are you saying? Are you going to get to that? Because I'm interested to see how deep of this gap you think.
I mean, if you're listening to this on Friday, you can go check out my updated positional rankings, top 24 rankings per position on my Instagram and Twitter page at DraftRoomPod. Go check that out. But I've got Stephon Diggs in the top 12, and I don't have Adam Thielen in the top 12. And let me tell you why. Because Dalvin Cook coming back makes a huge difference here, right? Because from weeks 1 to 8, like I was talking about, we all know Thielen caught he had 8 games in a row, 100-plus yards. He tied a record. Who's the first one to do that? I think that was it Randy Moss or who had 8 straight games in it?
I think it was Moss. Yeah, I'd have to check that.
Moss or Johnson. I think it might have been Calvin Johnson. But anyways, per game on average, he was getting 12 targets, 8 receptions, 116 yards, 6 touchdowns out of his 8 total touchdowns came in those first 8 weeks.
Yeah.
He was actually the wide receiver 1 through 8 weeks. So
he was dominant. He was unbelievable.
If you drafted Thielen, you were extremely happy. You thought you had a league winner on your hands. But then in that same time frame, you look at Diggs as well, right? Who still had 300-plus yard games, and per game he was getting 10.6 targets, 7.25 receptions, 73.5 yards per game. He was a wide receiver 10 as well, so they were both top 12 wide receivers. And then Diggs missed week 9. Week 10 was a bye, and now you look at weeks 11 to 16. Thielen, let me compare his numbers from weeks 1 to 8, right? From 11 to 16, Thielen was getting 7.7 targets compared to his 12 targets. 5.3 receptions compared to 8 receptions, 64.7 yards compared to 116 yards. Right? It's a difference of about 5 targets a game that he was missing. And I want you guys to remember that number, the 5 targets right there. His production got cut in half, and he only scored 2 touchdowns in those weeks, 11 to 16, over those games. He was a wide receiver 17. And Nick, do you remember what happened to Stephon Diggs towards the end, down the stretch?
He caught like a touchdown in 4 straight weeks or something of that nature?
Something like that. He caught 5 of his 9 touchdowns in those 6 weeks.
I gotcha.
So 9 targets, 6 receptions, 65 yards a game average. He was also still the wide receiver 10 there. And now you bring in Cook, who's taken away those 5 targets from Adam Thielen. Cook was averaging 5.5 targets a game, 4 touchdowns in that span, 2 rushing, 2 receiving. So that stabilizing run game, especially with his Gary Kubiak zone run scheme, he runs a hybrid zone run scheme. And if you look at what he did in Denver, you look at his time in Denver, what he did with the running backs there, longer developing plays with Demaryius Thomas as well, those play action shots down the field. I mean, Irv Smith is also a potential field stretcher now, running those seam routes where they don't just have Thielen across the middle of the field. And I feel like Thielen definitely takes a dip this year. And we can talk about Cousins all day as well. He's a guy who's thrown for 4K yards every single year that he's been a starter. So I mean, yeah. What do you feel about this bold prediction?
I think you bring up a bunch of interesting points here, and I wrote about Kubiak earlier in the year. And my question, one of the takeaways was: is there enough food to sustain both Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen as wide receiver 1s? And the good news is, in 18 out of 22 years, he's had at least one 1,000-yard receiver. 2 of the ones that weren't there was Andre Johnson getting hurt. He was on pace to smash 1,500 yards. He was having monstrous seasons before he went down. So really only 2 seasons in which a receiver wasn't just dominating in that offense. But it's also been very rare that he's had a very high quality number two. There's only been 4 seasons when he's had 2 guys top 1,000 out of 22 seasons calling plays. And those were those like John Elway, Rod Smith, Ed McCaffrey. That was 2 of those, 1998 and 2000. And then he had one with Jake Plummer to Rod Smith and Ashley Leslie. Both had over 1,000. And then it was a long stretch. In Houston, there was nobody. Then 2015, you get Peyton Manning to Demaryius and Emmanuel Sanders, both top 1,000. But the touchdowns have been pretty uninspiring. In the red zone, he gets very, very run-heavy. We see, guys like Arian Foster rack up 20 touchdowns, but Andre Johnson only have 4 or 5, even though he does a ton of the work to get them into the red zone. Kubiak does have a pretty historic tendency to not throw much in the red zone, but to run some more. So again, more love for Dalvin Cook, who I think we're going to talk about a little bit later too. But in terms of touchdowns and whatnot for receivers, it's certainly, maybe he's had a couple 1,000-yard ones, but he's never had a guy dominate in the touchdown department with another guy doing okay too. And then if I'm going to pick one or the other, I'm with you. I think Diggs is the better overall route runner, a better red zone presence, just has been kind of more consistent throughout his career, wasn't just blowing up for an 8-game span. And Thielen's had some monster games, and Thielen's great too. So I think those two are more... This roster is more composed of those 4 outlier seasons of 4 out of 22. I'd say both of them will top 1,000 more likely than not. Right. But if I'm going one or the other, and there is that risk of a less volume-based passing game, I see Diggs as kind of the more dominant Alpha X Andre Johnson, Demaryius Thomas style, a little bit more so than Adam Thielen. But Thielen could play the Ed McCaffrey 10 touch. I think they could both be solid, but I'm a little bit nervous for both of them, and it's not a passing game I'm really going all at either way.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. So Adam Thielen at the 302, do you think that's a fair price, or do you think 401 for Stephon Diggs is a little bit better?
And when you work in the price, for sure. I mean, definitely Stephon Diggs at the price is the no-brainer there. But even, and that's, regardless of price, the fact that I still think Diggs could probably outscore him, and I have Diggs higher as well in my own rankings. So you work in the price, and then it's a no-brainer, in my opinion.
Yeah, man. So I'm excited for Diggs. I think he has a true breakout season this year. But let's move on to the next